record on this. Excellent. And welcome, everybody. This is the 6th and final module on your 6 modules on community organizing. Here's what's happened so far. What must seem like more than a year and a half ago, you had your first module in which you walked around your parish or benefice and made a map and asked God what one thing God wanted you to notice. And you made beautiful maps, and we showed them to each other in the chapter house in Chelmsford. And then module number 2 was all about organizing, and in particular, it was all about one-to-ones, and you got into the habit, I hope, for most of you, of a weekly one-to-one, or if you're giving a little bit less time, if you have a bit less time, you can devote to parish or benefice-wide ministry, then slightly fewer one-to-ones a week pro rata, but you did your one-to-ones, and then you had a module on listening, and you listened to people in your community, specifically about that issue of justice or issue of need that you had felt God putting on your heart with a view to acting. And then you planned, and you learnt the tool Naomi as a way of planning the action you would take. And then you acted. And in just a moment, we're going to share with one another a little bit about what shape our action took. And it really, in a way, it doesn't matter what the action was within reason, as long as it emerged from that listening that you did and was for the common good. But we did ask you if you can do that as a team, not as one individual, and equip that team so that it can operate without you being essential to it. And at the end of the action, hopefully, your team looks at what you achieved together and says, we did that, and they're absolutely right, they did. And this is the final module, and this one we've called A Place at the Table. And I'm going to be saying good on you for the things that you've achieved. I'm going to give you some good news about how much you need to do to complete your series of 6 modules, because the answer is not very much do you need to do further. So I hope that will refresh you all this evening. I'll tell you about getting a certificate for it and all of those things. Don't get too excited about that stuff. And then once we've done that, I'll just challenge you by saying, this is brilliant. Now, what might a next stage be, albeit that the next stage is, as it were, likely to be in your own time, and you might not get credit for it, but God will know how you might develop these actions in the future to the next thing. So, welcome everybody. I want to start by saying well done, and we want to hear, we can't hear much from all of us that are on this call, but I do want to hear a little bit about what it is that you've done. And as a way of feeding back all of that, could I ask everyone to find a piece of paper? If you really don't have a piece of paper or a pen anywhere to hand, you can sort of do this job in your head and imagine that you're writing on a piece of paper. it's just a way of collating what we did. I'll give you a moment to find your bits of paper. So if you wouldn't mind taking your piece of paper and a pen and dividing it equally into 4. In other words, make a massive great cross on the page so you've got 4 quadrants. And could you write a letter in each of those 4 quadrants? The first letter is E. Doesn't matter what order these go, but one of your quadrants will be marked with the letter E. The second with the letter M for mother, though in this case the M is for mercy, as a matter of fact. A third with the letter J, which is for justice. And a final one, it's probably going to have to be P/C. That's not one letter, is it? But there you go. That's the title of your 4th quadrant. So let me explain what these letters stand for. E stands for evangelism. And I am defining that quite broadly as any way in which we explicitly pass on the good news of Jesus. But I think I am thinking this does need somehow to include words. You'll know that it was said that St. Francis of Assisi had said, preach the gospel to all people, and if necessary, use words. He never said that. And I'm afraid it's not really possible in our culture. It might have been possible in his culture, where people, as they grew up, had a certain amount of knowledge of what the good news was, but in ours, words are probably needed. So that quadrant is evangelism. But having said it's sharing the good news of Jesus, I don't then want to say, and it has to be done in this way, otherwise it's not valid. Lots of different activities can completely legitimately be evangelism. The second quadrant with the letter M, that's for mercy. Things that we do that serve people and make their lives better, because God made us to serve and to love in practical ways. J is for justice. The things where, in the words of the 5 marks of mission, we challenge the unjust structures of society. And then finally, the P/C, that's for pastoral care and community and congregational development. It's the things that we do for the people who are already regular attenders at our churches. Yeah. And maybe congregational development is better because, of course, any good church gives pastoral care to anyone that asks for it, whether they're regular attenders or not. I'm not implying that they don't. So think about the action that you have done or are presently involved in, and try and write it down on that quadrant. I would not be at all surprised if many of the things that you've done actually straddle a couple of quadrants. They might even straddle 3, I don't know, or they might be securely in one. I promise I'm not now going to go on and tell some of you that the thing you did was substandard because you're not doing it in the quadrant I think is better. I promise that is not my motive this evening. It's just a way of thinking about the thing that we did or are soon to be engaged in, that is our action, and how we might categorize it. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to think about that. Okay, so let's get some feedback quadrant by quadrant. So if you wouldn't mind using the chat function for this. And in the chat, first of all, if some of the action that you take is in the category of evangelism, would you mind putting in the chat what it is? And of course, if you straddle a couple of different quadrants, you're going to write perhaps the same activity under several of these different headings, and that's absolutely fine. But if at least one of the headings that your action took place under is evangelism, then please put that in the chat. Just, it doesn't have to be a full sentence. There we go. So you're already writing. Okay, so Alpha T says, okay, so that's interesting. So T, does that mean, what was the big thing that you noticed, T?
It was really the need in the community for human connection.
And actually, then, as you listened to the community and found their need for, you found that there was an openness to holding an alpha group that, you know, well, that's the sort of connection people were up for doing.
Yeah, and what we found is that there are some individuals who still are not, convinced by the evangelism, but are really keen to carry on meeting together as a group going forward because it meant that much to them.
Fantastic. Thank you. Safe spaces for homework, Claire. Go on, tell me about the evangelism aspect of that. I can absolutely see the homework space as a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah,
where's
so
evangelism?
we haven't started it yet. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that actually when we hold it, there will be chance to talk about why we're doing it and it being God. But actually, in the creation of the network of people who are agencies who are interested in joining in, we end up having those conversations about God and the Holy Spirit leading and things like that. And then I had a really interesting one with someone the other day, and then she said, "Yes, I call it like the universe bringing things together." And like, well, I call it God, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what we're discovering is whichever one of these quadrants they start in, they can easily end up in another quadrant. I wish I could read, I could go around everyone, but I'll just read out from the chat. We got a toddler group, we got a pantry in the porch, we got sharing the gospel at Eco Church. Nick, I think yours might come in other quadrants, so we will come back to you, I promise. Community coffee. We got pre-loved uniform distribution because it raises the question of why churches are involved. And I'm sure many of you have read the book Provocative Church by Graham Tomlin. And the argument of that book is actually the problem is not we don't have the questions, the answer to people's questions. The problem is people are not really asking any questions. So the first job of the church is to do things that cause people to ask why on earth we are acting as we do. Yeah, supporting women recovering from domestic abuse, outreach youth group, free community meal and warm space has the potential of bringing people to church. Somebody's asking questions about Jesus, youth ministry with space provided and evangelism and justice and an orchestra. So I've had the privilege of reading an article written by Joe about launching an orchestra. I bet that's the first orchestra that has ever been launched or relaunched as a result of a community organizing project. It's fantastic, Joe. Thank you. So, brilliant, really good. And our claim is that evangelism works best when we've started by seeking what God's doing, done really good listening to people, planned it, and then acted. Evangelism doesn't work when all we've done is brought a message to people who aren't ready to listen about things that aren't the things on their heart and mind. Okay, so secondly, mercy. What are the things in the quadrant of mercy that came out in the action that you took. Again, just write them in the chat if you wouldn't mind. So again, some brilliant stuff. Starting, I think, with Familia helping parents with basic needs. Yeah, Familia, do you want to talk about what you did? Because I remember you talking before you even started that about something that you'd been listening to in your community.
Yeah, it's just a baby bank, and I haven't got very. I have to be honest, I haven't got very far, but we've got things in place, and it's just that identifying like the needs of parents who have come, and so I've got a pool of parents now who want to be a part of it. So it's just to take it forward with that, yeah.
No,
and who have said I've got loads of stuff in my loft, and there is a need in Bado, and I'm willing to help.
Yeah.
So it's that you know, the mercy of people wanting to help.
Absolutely. So you no longer have a viable loft, but you have done a wonderful thing for the kingdom of God. Yeah. Toddler group, safe spaces for homework, absolutely. And that thing of showing love and interest and care for individuals, absolutely. Pre-loved uniform distribution, contributing to the well-being of the school community, through participation in the orchestra, free community meals, absolutely. And as Oyen says, it is about meals and heating, but it's about loneliness as well, very often. Counseling and teaching tools for coping with hurt and pain. Pantry in the porch, absolutely. Warm space, brilliant. Okay, well, we're halfway through. Now let me ask you to share anything that came up that you would say is sort of congregational development for people already in church. My guess is there won't be many things that we haven't already heard under one of the other categories, but probably we will put things that sort of overlap very legitimately into that. So so do share the stuff that the congregation has gained from, that has come out of the action that you've done. Eco-church, yeah. So eco-church is a perfect example of that, isn't it, Dawn? Because eco-church is absolutely, as we'll see in a minute, challenging structures that you know, need to be challenged, but it's also providing a whole new way of worshipping and creativity. Yeah, absolutely. And Haley, I was thinking somebody might say something like this, yeah, that the warm space stroke free lunch, yes, we could say that's outward, and it is in a good way outward looking, but actually the church is enormously blessed by having a chance to be involved in that. Yeah, and if our congregation increases, then that encourages all the people already there, as well as, of course, our new members. Wonderful. Okay, so finally in this section, what in the action that you've done is under the category of justice, of challenging the unjust structures of society? And Jackie, yeah, developing the ecumenical partnerships was under the category congregation development, really important. Yeah, so Bex, the pantry, learning to be generosity outside the walls. Okay, yeah. Claire, now that's interesting. Tell me more about justice in terms of the safe spaces idea.
I was reading something recently that was talking about the Jubilee year in the Old Testament and how that was about not perpetuating debt, but basically things between generations, because it all returned back. So you couldn't keep accumulating wealth. So some get wealthier, some are more deprived. And that's sort of a godly economy. And that made me really think that that's what this is about, because otherwise people without the housing and the help and the laptops, it just perpetuates generation to generation. Whereas if we can help that, it stops it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, Joe, school providing financial support. So, I mean, I don't know if that was a tough negotiation or quite an easy one.
No, they were very willing. But
Sorry?
They were very willing.
Good, okay,
but,
that's fine.
Yeah, it was a child his mother wouldn't have paid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really important to say that a negotiation doesn't have to involve placards and anger, you know, in order to be a negotiation. Sometimes when we negotiate with agencies or the state or local government or a business, actually it's a very consensual, happy conversation, and they're very happy to do what we're asking without us having to you know, demonstrate our power or any of those things. But it's still a negotiation. We are challenging an unjust thing, but we're doing it then in quite an easy partnership with a body, you know, with some decision makers. So justice, council providing planning permission for floodlights, and Essex Youth Services providing the lights to allow young people to access sports facilities after dark. Fantastic example. Justice, okay, so Hayley, how have you challenged the local councillors?
I think the answer is not really yet, but
Okay.
I have them in my sights.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's
Because
yeah.
they're all very much, oh, this is a very good thing. And right, okay, you know, why are so many people needing this? And yeah, it's great to support it, but it's why it's needed in the first place.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. Sorry, I'm not picking on you in a bad way, because I think you're exactly right. And yeah, Dawn, the whole eco agenda, absolutely. I think that you know, it's a mark of mission in its own right, but also when we challenge people to recognize the climate emergency, we are also challenging unjust structures. It's the fourth mark of mission as well.
We did a really interesting one of our sessions on air miles and getting people to think about the complexities. It wasn't as easy as just buy local and hurting those farmers who struggle. So that was really interesting to look at the complexities of the whole issue.
Fantastic. So I just want to say to everybody, good on you. You have taken action for the common good. And, you know, I'm sure that had we not had these modules, you probably would have taken action for the common good in various ways anyway. But I really hope that what you've heard and been thinking about has stimulated you and helped you to do this, and at least be giving you a chance to say to your training incumbent, no, I'm doing a module on it. I definitely need to do something that is relevant and for the common good. Because my experience of church, not just of sort of the experience of curates, but of church in general, is that actually the amount of action decreases over time as we get tireder. And we end up sort of kind of taking it, but so much of our energy gets channeled into keeping the people already in church happy, that the amount of evangelism and acting for mercy and acting for justice gets denuded, and that's not right. I mean, it would also be, of course, incredibly inappropriate if we put all our energy outside the congregation, because then we will end up with no church to do anything. It's like, you know, there is an element to you put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help anyone else. It is really important that we build up the local church. And God said to Abraham, I will bless you, and then in you all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So it's absolutely not wrong to put energy into caring for the people we already have attending. But I mean, yeah, you hear what I'm saying. It is easy for that to be all that we do. Were you the cohort that had Bishop Tim Stevens doing your pre-ordination retreat? No, it's another cohort, but he did a pre-ordination retreat, and his refrain through his talks was change the world. That's all we ask of you. Which was, he was deliberately getting a smile, but he kind of terrifyingly has a point that is indeed what is being asked of us. Okay, so what do you do now? Well, one of the things that you do is you complete the module and get and then you can say honestly you have received a certificate in community organizing. Now, I'll be honest, it's not validated by anybody. And you certainly, it would be a lack of integrity if ever you were to claim that you were you had done some sort of qualification as such. So you do need to say a certificate in community organising from the Diocese of Chelmsford, but still, it is not irrelevant when you're applying for your next job to be able to say in that box that they ask you to fill in, you know, what additional training have you done? You will say, I've done my IME2 training. You can say, I don't know, maybe you say, and I also did a sort of first aid certificate at my local fire station or something. But you can also say, I received a certificate in community organising from the Diocese of Chelmsford. There were 6, and if you want to go into more detail, there were 6 modules and do all of those things. So what do you need to do in order to get that? So you need to do 3 things that some of you have done some of, nobody's done all of. Number 1, you need to complete that 3-paragraph article about the action that you did and send that to me. I'm not promising all of them will be published in Community Organising News, but some of them will be. And anyway, it's not a bad discipline to get into, to work out what would an article for sort of church-based periodical that was just 3 paragraphs long look like. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is you need to attend an event that relates to justice. The easy way to do it, but I mean, I am biased in this, so take that, bear that in mind. The easy way to do this is to be at the founding assembly for Citizens Chelmsford on the 15th of March. And I'll send round a reminder to everybody of how you book up for that. It's at Anglia Ruskin University. But I do get that not everyone's going to be free that evening, and I do get that Chelmsford is not easy to get to on an evening for some of us. So that's fine. So find another one. I will be quite easy to convince that the event was the right sort of event. It doesn't need to be with Citizens UK or one of the citizens groups necessarily. It could be with Climate Action, for example, or I mean, you know, there's an almost unlimited choice of different organizations and groups. But I would like it to be something in the justice quadrant, where a structural injustice, an injustice, I mean, however we define it, is being confronted. Maybe where racism is being faced down, maybe where people are being convinced of the reality of the climate crisis, maybe where women's rights are being spoken for, maybe, anyway, there's lots of maybes, aren't there? It might be something in party politics, because although as a church we are rightly not partisan, there's absolutely no reason why you might not be called by God to be involved in party politics in some way. If you're a party member, then by definition you believe that the party that you have joined is acting for justice, and maybe there's something that that party might call you to do. But more likely it's not political, but something in the justice sphere is really important. Number one, your 3 paragraphs. Number 2, attend an event where people are standing for justice. And number 3, tell me that you've done that. I'll believe you. You don't necessarily have to show me a selfie of you at Trafalgar Square, but why not? I'd love to see it. If you tell me you've done it, I believe you that you've done it. And then once I've received those, I will send you a certificate. It will not be a very impressive certificate. It will be made by me on Canva, okay? Famileo asked by when? Well, I mean, I suppose in theory, whenever you finish your QSC. I'm not setting a deadline on it, but okay, but probably yeah, I mean, don't put it off, but also see what opportunities there are and go and have a go. But you'll notice I'm not asking you to do any more reading, even on Moodle. And that's quite disappointing for many of you I know who are longing for at least 3 more pages to read on Moodle. That there will not be any more reading on Moodle in this set of modules. Sorry. Any questions on process, on all of that?
So is it all right for those of us who are playing catch up, or what I'm actually doing is kind of in project management terms, I'm reframing it, because what I'd planned was too big, right. But I think, so going for the bronze award for Eco Church is too big, but I think that a couple of things like creating a bug hotel and signing it in the churchyard and twinning toilets, perhaps a couple of things like that towards
I mean, they both sound brilliant things, as long as you're building a team that will do it, not just doing it by yourself, I would say, no. Catherine. But yeah, no, either of those sounds a really good idea. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so it's as you say, it's formulating those teams, but I've got some people who are prepared to do it. Thank you.
Yep. No, that's fine. Yeah, no, that
I might not be
that's
the only
really
person who's reframing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is an element of you start doing one thing and you end up doing something else. And actually, it seems to me that's an important thing in ministry in general. That actually we do our best to be responding to God, but it's a mistake if we just stick to that first impulse we had, even when all the evidence suggests that no, God might be calling me to do this slightly different thing. Absolutely fine. And remember, this is not, it's not meant to be an extra obstacle in your way. It's meant to be enabling something that is life-giving for you and those that you work with. Okay. So that's the first part of our evening. And to summarize, well done. You are on the way. I am so pleased at these actions that you've taken. But is there something more for some of us? Well, community organizers will tend to say that most of us have done 4 of the 5 phases of community organizing, and that's really good, but that it might be even better if we challenged ourselves to work on the fifth phase. And the 5th phase is what we're calling a place at the table. There is a sense that what we do, if it is largely in the sphere of mercy in particular, needs to be completed precisely by enabling people to take their seat at a table. In other words, the best way to change the world, it's not about us becoming more powerful or even us feeling better about ourselves for all the good things that we've done. The best thing to do is to get people to the tables of power and the table of God. Think of it this way. I think there are triangles all over the place, and God wants us to turn them into tables. I mean, that is quite personal language to me. To be honest, I can't see a triangle without wanting to destroy it. So don't ever invite me to an orchestral concert, Joe. I might be dangerous. I can't see a triangle without wanting to turn it into a table. When I look at the church and look at society, what I see is people having power over others. And sometimes in church, that means there's a small number of people who have power over a large number of people. And I think what God is calling us to there is, well, everyone sitting around the table, a flat team, a team where everybody is somehow engaged. And then in society, I see that very often the way that people try to solve problems is by having the triangle the other way up. And I'm flanneling as I look through a document on screen because I want to share screen in a moment with it. And I'm just boring you by scrolling to no good effect. Sorry. Where is it? So this is sometimes called the power triangle. You'll see there are three figures on it. This, you may also have encountered this if you trained in coaching or counseling. And the three characters are the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. And we often see life in these terms. Let's take an example, and it's a real example that I was reading about today, of a housing estate in Birmingham, where there's widespread mold growing. It's a social housing provider, and clearly the upkeep has not been done, and people can't afford the heating to be as high as they have in previous years, and the insulation's a bit rubbish, and it seems quite widespread that people are dealing with mold inside their flats. And one thing that the local warm spaces did, most of which are in churches, not all, but most of them are churches, is they joined together to provide warm spaces so that people who had mold in their homes could go to a place that was mold-free and warm and have company and access to affordable food and all the things that we've talked about. Brilliant idea. So you might say that if you've got mold on your walls, you're a victim. And if you're the housing association that is not dealing with your tenants in a way that removes the mold off their walls, you are, in that respect, a persecutor. I'm sure you are a lovely person with good intentions, but from the point of view of the person with mold, you are the persecutor. And the church and some other organizations too come in with their warm spaces, and they're a rescuer. And that is really good to do. It is in the category of mercy. It is a perfectly viable action. And if one of you had done that, and some of you have indeed worked with producing warm spaces, we would all have said this evening, good on you, that's brilliant. And moreover, may well have been the thing that is calling you to do in those circumstances. I'm absolutely not saying that that's bad. But what else could the church do? Well, the church could go on to send a squad into that particular tower block with bleach and paint, and they could remove the mold and repaint it. And that would be brilliant. And a church might well be called to do exactly that. That'd be fantastic. But each of those solutions leaves this triangle pretty much as it is. There are people with power over others, and there are people that are powerless or have power under. And actually, no amount of mold removal would have dealt with that particular, would have stopped that triangle being there. Saul Alinsky was sort of the founder of community organizing in 1950s Chicago. And he talked about another sort of response, which is one in which we put the victim into the place of power and put everybody else into the place of the powerless. We turn the triangle around, in other words. And Alinsky put it this way: the strange thing is that when the have-nots become the haves, they treat the new have-nots in exactly the way that the previous haves treated them, which is an odd way to put it, but you see what he's saying, that actually community organizers would say it's all very well making the triangle less oppressive, But what we need is to remove this triangle altogether and replace it with a table at which everybody has a seat. Not a table in which the tenants have all the cards and everyone has to do what they say. A genuine table for conversation where everybody is respected and we can work together at finding a solution. And the solution that we find might indeed include a squad from the church coming in with some bleach, but it will probably also include the landlords taking their responsibility a little bit more seriously. It might involve the tenants changing their behavior in some way in terms of where they dry their washing or something. I don't know, I'm making it up, but you see what I'm saying, that if we're having a conversation about this, we're not turning the triangle round, and we're not just temporarily solving a problem in a mission of mercy sort of way, important as those sometimes are. We're actually changing and challenging the power structure altogether in order to make it into a table. Comments. Can you see ways in which some of the things we've talked about that are brilliant things, but are in the category of mercy, might be worked on and moved on from, so that they also become joining in in turning a triangle into a table? And Fumileo in the chat has said, instead of giving me fish, teach me how to fish. Yeah, exactly. You know, instead of having to repaint the walls of this tower block every year because the mold keeps coming back, what about dealing with the damp course or whatever it is, or the insulation or the ventilation or something? Yeah. Doing with rather than doing for. Lisa's been reading the stuff. Exactly. And community organizers love to use that word with. They talk about power over. So in the triangle that I showed you, both the persecutor, in this case the landlord, and the rescuer, in this case the church perhaps, have power over. And what we want is everyone to have power with, including the landlord. The landlord has a right to some power with in this situation as well. But a shared power around the table is going to get things done a lot better. Does anyone else have a metaphor or picture of how to do this? Haley. Yeah. So Haley, I love that. The Warm Space Free Lunch volunteers, the users have started to help with the cooking and the setting up and the clearing away. So it doesn't feel like, you know, well-meaning rich Christians are doing a thing for you poor people. It feels like we're all mucking in together and we all make our contribution. I think that's brilliant. Yeah. I spent a summer in Madrid with the Anglican cathedral there, and they had a weekly meal, and you could say it's sort of like make lunch, but the thing about this weekly meal was, the rule was, everybody has to bring something to the meal. But of course you could bring a bread roll, or you could bring a whole casserole that you've cooked in your oven at home. And everyone sat down, including the bishop and the dean of the cathedral, and they all shared food together and had a conversation together and passed things around and tried each other's Spanish cheeses. Yeah. Oh, that's good from Dawn, giving those on the margins of church, the new, the young, a voice in how we worship, not only the ministry team and the PCC. Yeah, because often these triangles are in church, aren't they? Yeah. Somebody tell us a story about a river going upstream. Go on. It's all of us know the story already, and there's been too much of my voice, especially those on the recording. Somebody unmute and tell us about what we do with the river.
Go upstream and stop people falling in instead of pulling them out.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Yeah, we spend all our time pulling people out of the river, and the time comes to go upstream and see who's pushing them in. I think that's Desmond Tutu, isn't it, originally? But it's pointing at this sort of the same idea. And community organizing claims that's the only way you really change the world in a permanent, or not permanent, nothing's permanent, is it, except God, but in a long-lasting kind of way. It's only by helping people sit down at the tables of power that there is real change to a culture. I mean, it's like the Magnificat. God will tear down the mighty from their thrones and lift up the humble and meek. So that means everybody's going to end up roughly at eye level, I guess. If some people are being brought down and some people are being lifted up, that they're all going to look each other in the eye, and those with need have been, we haven't spoken for them. People have been given the opportunity to speak for themselves, and that's why. I mean, it isn't just that I want to fill the room at the founding assembly at Anglia Ruskin that I'm hoping some of you will be there. I really want you to see what will hopefully be a genuine example of us giving a voice, not amplifying the voice, giving the microphone to the voice of people who are, for example, Ukrainian guests, as they're dealing with what happens at the end of 6 months being hosted, and they're going to be asking the council to provide them with a named person who can accompany them through that transition. You're going to hear from care workers that are paid less than the real living wage about why it matters to them and what difference it will make to their lives to be paid real living wage. And you're going to hear, I hope, from people who are or have recently experienced street sleeping about why modular housing would really help them to get off the streets and have a roof over their heads. That's what we're trying to do, so that it's not vicars. I mean, the world probably doesn't need to hear from more vicars. It is the actual people who have that actual recent experience and perhaps present experience that get to be heard by the decision makers in a public forum with hopefully 200 people in the room cheering at the right moments and making sure that the politicians take seriously the stuff that they're hearing. Do keep using the...
I've got an example.
Go for it, Jackie.
Andy, I've got an example. It's not something that I'm doing here or working with people on, but it's people that I've got to know through the bringing together of agencies that I've been working on. And I did the funeral of one of the girls that I'm going to talk about, family member. And so the relationships that I formed, I got to understand that they had a child, special educational needs SEND children, and there was a sort of a raising up of the voices of those parents who have children in this area, in the Dengie, where there's a real lack of provision and children being sent to schools miles away and taxied miles away. And so gradually working, there's been agencies working together. So they've formed, you know, a little group, and they've raised their confidence. And these two particular mums have been advocating for SEND provision in this area, and they've been in front of Essex County Council. They've been at allocations meetings. They've been like a force to be reckoned with, and they're just mums of these two children that have begun all sorts and campaigned for a change for the provision in this area. And they've just won an award for the influence, and they're just, you know, people who live like next door that have just been encouraged and supported to do so through United in Kind and all sorts of agencies in this area. And it's just like a real sort of community organising model of approach or method of approach that's enabled them to tell their stories, and they've been heard. So
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a really good example.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, and it will only be for 10 minutes, I'm afraid. I'm going to put everybody into breakout groups of, let's say, about 3, and ask you to say, is there a further thing that, if you had the time and energy, I do get, this might be a bit theoretical because you're going to say, I really do not have the time or energy to do this. Okay, I get that. But if you did, if your time and energy was unlimited, is there something that you could do adding to the action you've already done that would further make sure that people had a seat at the tables of power? Here we go. So okay, so you'll be in groups of 3 or 4, and as I say, that will be 10 minutes. I won't ask anyone to feedback, so don't worry about you have to take notes, but there will be a chance when we get back, if anybody heard something that they think the rest of us should hear, that they can share it if they wish. So Gary and Dawn, how's the technology working?
Yeah, mine keeps dropping out, Andy. I've turned the video off.
Sorry about that.
I've just got literally, as you were saying about groups, I dropped out again. I've just got back. I've just got it
no,
back.
I get you. So can you see an invitation to room 4? I don't know how I invite you again. This is what I'll do. I'll move you to room 1 and then I'll move you again. So don't move to room 4.
Yeah, okay, I've got that. Yes,
go for it. Yeah, no, I feel for you, Gary. I know it's frustrating, isn't it, when that